to dance and pray, and they hold their hands up halfway skybound, and they hold their hands up halfway skybound.
Well, good afternoon for everyone who's tuned in for another Island Storytellers. Yes, this is where we bring to you the concept, the whole art form of storytelling. It's quite cool, to tell you the truth. Always has a little side effect of a touch of humor, a lesson to be learnt, mostly a touch of humor. You would have to say that, would you? Well, there's irony. There's all sorts of things in there that just sort of, it's a wonderful way to learn about life, I think, the way the stories are told. Now, interesting enough, Lee Porteous got a hold of me long time ago, and we've been doing this on Sundays all the way. We stopped for COVID, and we got back to doing it again. Today will be the last one we'll be doing here on a Sunday afternoon. June, we're going to be getting two ready for the 39 days of July, so that the fourth one, which I think is the 22nd, we're not even here that day. We're doing
Pride
something
Day.
else.
And it's Pride Day.
Yeah, it's Pride Day, right? So that's going to take us all up. So what we'll do is we're going to actually have storytelling, island storytelling, in the 39 days of July on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I'm not sure which Sunday it is.
July 2nd? I'm not sure.
No, it's in there. But anyway, it'll be in the brochure, which will be out on July 16th. If all goes well, if I get all the finished little bios and all that done, we'll have it all ready. Now, one of the things we will do when we come back, we'll take August off, and when we come back in September, I think Lee and I have decided we're going to look for another time slot, not the Sunday afternoon. Maybe a Thursday evening or something at 7 o'clock. There's a lot of people that Sundays are just, I just barely got here in time because I was at home working because it was not wasn't a rainy day and we could get work done. And if you have a day off, so to speak, as my partner does, we started approaching all the chores that had to be done. And we understand that. So that's why we're thinking we might switch it to a Thursday, maybe 7 o'clock, an early one, 7 o'clock,
Yep.
And I think we'll get more people for it because it is a wonderful art form. And Lee Porteous she just sort of makes sure that it all happens and gathers all the storytellers over the years. And she's quite the storyteller herself. So let's get the show started for those in the audience as well. Give it up for Lee Porteous.
I always love getting applause when I haven't done anything yet. So, yes, and there's a group that's been meeting at the library. We've had Tuesday night sessions, and those will continue as well. And those folks are getting ready to be able to come up here too, I think, or at least be in the audience as well. So I am Lee Porteous, as you heard. On behalf of the Storytellers on Vancouver Island, want to express our gratitude to Longevity John for the opportunity to tell stories in this wonderful theater and that he's created, and to Ted Cadillac for making us heard and seen so well. Whenever or however you come to see us, we encourage you to make a donation to help keep the showroom open and stories happening here. We acknowledge with respect the Cowichan First Nation, the largest single First Nation in BC, on whose traditional territory this event is taking place, and whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. This is one of the series of storytelling events, as you heard, and for those of us who are in person, I've jumped my line here. But welcome to those who are here in person, who are joining us now and who will join us later online. Today I was afraid I'd be on my own as the other tellers who have come here weren't available, but luckily for us all, Pat Forrest has a cancellation of her other event, and so you have the two of us to tell you stories on the theme today, which is love and other lunacies. Welcome to all of you who are or will be joining us online and those who are here today. For those of you who are here with us, please mute your phones. The rest of you, please yourself. So I'm going to tell the first story, which is Tam Lin. There are many versions of this old story from Scotland, including an old and still sung ballad. Catterhall, in the old days, was known for the beautiful castle, its lovely grounds, and especially its gardens. However, in Janet's great-grandfather's father's life, something happened. Some sort of curse fell on the land. It came under the sway of the Queen of the Fairies. She and her people lived under the green hill nearby, and human beings could no longer live there. The clan head who occupied the castle and his successors all moved into town. Gradually, the grounds got worse. The beautiful forest became dark and dangerous. And no one went into the gardens anymore, particularly the main garden for the castle. And now that garden was dark and dangerous. You could hear screams and other cries come from it. You'd see shadows and nothing to cast them. And the smell that came from that garden. Rotting fruit, rotting bodies, perhaps of vermin trapped in the walls. No one went in there except, of course, some young people. Perhaps on a dare, perhaps to prove something. But they paid a price. Their sleep was uneasy and anxious, and they had troubling dreams. And sometimes in that garden, Tam Lim would appear. Tam Lin, he must have been one of the fairy folk, one of the fae. And if you met Tam Lin in those gardens, there was always a price to be paid. And if you were a young woman, you might be lucky and just have to give up your favorite brooch. But sometimes it would be something more personal, which you never spoke of again. Now, Janet wanted the clan to take over Catterhaugh again, wanted to restore it. And she pestered her father for such a long time that he finally agreed that she would inherit that. It would be given to her when she reached the age of her majority, which was 16 years. So on her 16th birthday, she wore the dress her mother wanted her to wear. She spoke to all the people she should speak to as the daughter of the clan leader. She danced with everyone she should dance with. And then, when she waved goodbye to the last guest, she went upstairs to change. And she changed into her walking shoes, her skirt, which she pulled up over the knees so she could stride out. She put her hair up. She wore her clan tartan around her shoulders, and off she went to the garden at Catterhaugh. When she arrived there, the sun was just setting and the last beams were hitting the top of the mountains. When she went into the garden, she could see what an awful place it was. It was dank and dark. It was gray and black. There were nettles and thistles and thorns. The only piece of color was a double dark red rose. She picked that rose, and instantly beside her was standing a tall, handsome young man, blonde hair and blue eyes. And he said, "Why are you here without my command? And why have you picked my rose?" She said, "These are my lands, and this is my rose. I need no permission from anyone to be here." And they locked eyes together, his gray and her blue. And something connected. And what was given and what was taken, we do not know, but she did not return home until dawn the next day. And after a while, her father took her aside and said gently, "Janet, I think you may be with child." "Well, if I am with child, it is my choice, and whether the father is fey or human, it is not any of those who hang around your court, father." Despite her tone and her defiance, it was early the next morning that she went to the garden at Catterhaugh. And as she reached for a particular herb that the midwife had told her about, Tam Lin was suddenly there. "Janet, Janet, are you reaching for that herb to end the life that we have got between us? In 2 days, it will be all that's left of me on this earth. Tamlin, what is going to happen? You are one of the Fae. You live forever. I have lived 100 years longer than you have, Janet, but I am just as mortal as you are. And I was on 100, and all those years ago, I was riding through those lovely woods as they were then at Catterhall, and my horse missed a step, and I was thrown and knocked unconscious. And when I woke up, there was the fairy queen. And she put me under a spell. She took me to her kingdom under the green hill, to the court there. She honored me. She made me a knight in her court, and she favored me. But every year on All Hallows Eve, the fairy queen and her knights ride forth. And every 7th Hallows Eve, they ride forth, and they must pay their tithe to the devil. They must sacrifice a life, but they never sacrifice one of their own. Oh, no. No, it is one of our mortals that they've ensorcelled into their army, one of the knights. And this year, I have been out of favor with the queen. She favors another. So I am certain that this year it will be my life that is the sacrifice to the devil. But Tamlin, is there no way to escape this? What can be done? And he said, there is a way, but it requires the help of a mortal. And all who knew me or loved me have been in their graves for many years now. But Tamlin, I will help you. Tell me what I can do. And he looked into her eyes and said, yes, Janet, of the mortals I've known, I would say you are one who could do this. But I want you to know that whatever happens, I will never cause harm to you or to our child. And so he explained what was going to happen, and so it was that 2 nights later, Janet was hiding in the bushes near St. Miles Crossroad. She was wearing a thick green cloak, and she carried a bottle of holy water that she'd begged from the priest. And she listened. And then, through the fog and the dark, she heard a church bell from a distant church signaling midnight of All Hallows Eve. And then she heard other bells from another direction. They were the bells on the bridles of the fairy host. And soon she could see them galloping towards her. First was the fairy queen. As she passed, she was magnificent. Then came a great knight on a great black steed. She let that pass. And then another knight on a chestnut steed, and she let that pass. Then came a knight on a milk-white steed, and he did not have a glove on his left hand. That was Tamlin's signal to show her that that's who was on that horse. And so she rushed out of hiding and dragged him off the horse and held on to him tightly. The queen wheeled around and said, well then, Janet, is that false knight Tamlin that you're holding? And she could feel him squirm, and she looked up, and what she saw was a great serpent. She could see its fangs and the poison dripping, the venom from those fangs. So she held on even tighter. He had said he would not harm her. And then she could feel more movement and squirming, and now he was a great lion. She could see his teeth. She could smell his breath. She could feel his claws digging into her back. And then he squirmed again. And this time the queen said, well there, Janet, is that handsome, dashing knight Tamlin that you're holding? And she looked up, and it was a great lizard that she saw. She could see the scales. and watch him squirm. She held even tighter. And then the Fairy Queen said, "And well now, Janet, is that you're holding, that kind and tender Tam Lin?" And now it was a great bar of metal, but it was glowing red hot. She could feel it burning into her fingers. The pain was terrible, but she knew he would not harm her. And then it changed into a great flame. She knew what to do now. She dragged him over and threw him into the pond. And there was a great sizzling and crackling, and mist and smoke came up. And then he stood up, naked in his human skin. Now she took her cloak off, and she took the holy water and sprinkled it over him and her and covered him in the cloak as he stepped out of the pond. He turned to the Fairy Queen and said, "You have no power over me now. I am now free of you." And she said, "Tam Lin, if I had known when I brought you into my court and made you a knight, showed you honor, that you would betray me thus, I would have torn those gray eyes out of your face and put 2 knotholes in there. And I would have torn your heart out of your chest and pushed a rock, a stone in there instead." Then she wheeled and galloped off, followed by the fairy host. Well, Janet and Tam Lin did repair the castle and worked on the grounds. It took a long time to bring them back, but the curse had lifted. Maybe because the curse on Tam Lin, or the spell, had ended, but it may be because of the life that was begun in the garden. And so generations of blue and gray-eyed children ran laughing through the halls and played in the gardens and the yards. But they all knew the story. They knew about the green hill, and they knew what still lay under it. I'd sing you the ballad if I knew the tune. This one is called The Creature of the Night, and it comes from a collection by Margaret Reed MacDonald, 5-minute tales. So now you know how long you're going to be sitting listening to this one. Maria lived in a small house on the shore of the ocean. She was all alone except for her faithful dog. How she wished that a handsome young man would come by, but none ever did. One evening, just as the sun was setting, she heard a voice, a man's voice in the distance. "Maria, Maria, Maria." It was coming closer. "Maria, Maria, Maria." She could see the shadow on her doorstep. She was waiting for the knock. But then her dog burst out, "Maria, Maria, Maria is not here. Go away." The shadow was gone. Maria was furious. She yelled at her dog and she kicked that dog. And then the next day, she tied the dog outside in the yard and she wrapped the rope around its muzzle, tied that off. And then, as the sun was setting, she waited. She waited and she heard the voice again. It hadn't gone away. "Maria, Maria, 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 Maria." Closer and closer, and there, on the doorstep. But then from the backyard, the dog cried out, "Maria, Maria, Maria is not here. Go away." Phew, gone. Well, Maria was so angry. I hate to tell you this, but she went out to the backyard and she killed that dog and she buried it there in the backyard. The next night, she was waiting again, and it came. "Maria, Maria, Maria, closer and closer. She was waiting for the knock on the door. And then from the grave, that dog called out, "Maria, Maria, Maria is not here. Go away." Gone. Well, now she was so angry, she dug up that dog and she made a big fire and she burned it till just ashes were left. So the next night she was still hopeful. And as the sun set, there it was. Maria, 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 Maria. Closer and closer. There was a shadow on the doorstep. But those ashes, the dog's ashes, sang out, "Maria, Maria, Maria is not here. Go away." And it did. It was gone. The shadow was gone. Well, now she gathered up all of those ashes the next day. She took them up onto the cliff. She threw them out to the wind, and the wind whisked them far away and apart, and they were gone. The next night, as she waited, she had a bath. She washed her hair. She put on her best dress. She put on her makeup. She sat waiting, and it did come. Maria, 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 Maria. There it was, the shadow on her doorstep. She got up and she waited. Knock, knock, knock on the door. She threw the door open, and the creature of the night came in. You're waiting for the dog to help her again, eh? No. This next shorter one, I just thought, well, it's sort of love. You wanted love too much. This is called My John's Soul. It comes from Iceland, and I particularly found it in Kathleen Reagan's collection, Fearless Girls, Wise Women, and Beloved Sisters. I was telling Pat that when she was collecting all these stories, her daughters, her two young daughters, would read every story. And they didn't mind if the bad guy got killed, no problem there. But what they didn't want is they didn't want a woman hero, no matter how heroic she was, to end up dead at the end of the story. So I can assure you, through the whole book, all the women heroes are alive to tell the tale. And this one, no exception. There was an old couple. They'd been together a very long time. The man was quite disagreeable and contrary. And he was lazy too. And he was not good at anything around the house. So it was left up to his wife to make sure that things were done and to try and scrape together enough money to keep them going. She was not happy with this, and she let him know that. But in the end, she was very fond of him and made sure that he never went short of anything. Well, time passed, and he fell ill. And as he was lying there on the bed, it was clear he didn't have very much time. And it occurred to her that he was not well prepared to get into heaven, and that she might have to help him with that. So she sewed together a particular bag, a linen, very closely woven bag. And then as he breathed out his last breath, she had it over his face and captured the soul as it left his body as well. She tied it up, she put it in her apron, and she headed off to heaven. She had to walk quite a long way before she came to heaven's borders, but she did arrive there and to the great gate. So, bang, 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 bang on the gate. And it opened, and it was St. Peter who greeted her. "And what are you doing here?" he said. "You are not dead." "No, I'm here to ask you, St. Peter, to let that John of mine into heaven. You may have heard something of him." Yes, 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 he says, "but I cannot do it. I have indeed heard of your John, and I haven't heard anything good of him yet." She said, "Well, St. Peter, I'm surprised that you would talk that way. After all, don't you remember what happened with yourself? Do you not remember denying your master 3 times? Wham! He slammed the door and went inside. She was a little ticked about that, but then bang, 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 she knocked on the door again. This time it was St. Paul, and she greeted him and asked him who he was, and he explained who he was, and she said she tried to persuade him to let her John into heaven. But he said, no, I cannot do that. Your John deserves no mercy. Well, that made her really angry. And she said, he deserves no mercy. What about you? Do you remember the days when you were persecuting our Lord and his followers? No mercy. I don't know how I should even speak to you about that. Bam! Door shut. She collected herself. Bang, 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 bang on the door. And this time, it was the Holy Virgin Mary that answered the door. Oh, my lady, she said, I'm so happy to see you. I'm here to ask for my John to be admitted into heaven, even though that Peter and that Paul won't allow it. Yes, said Mary, but I understand, but I can't do it either, because that John of yours, he was such a brute, wasn't he? Oh, I understand why you might say that, but you, I thought, of all people, would know that everyone has sometimes something they do that is perhaps not so wonderful. Have you forgotten that you yourself had a child with no father for it? Bam! The door was shut and Mary was gone. Or bang, 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 bang. And this time, it was Christ himself who opened the door. And he said, well, why are you here? Well, and she was very humble this time. I'm so happy to see you, our master. I want to beg for this poor, miserable soul to be allowed in to worm itself just inside the door of heaven. No, said Christ. I know that John of yours, and he had no faith in me. And he was just about to shut the door, but she was not slow. She took that bag, and just as the door was being shut, she threw it past Christ's ear, and it went into heaven, and bam, the door was shut and locked. Then a great relief came over her, a burden off her shoulders. And then, with great happiness, she turned and walked towards home and out of this story. And we know nothing more about what happened to her, or indeed, what happened to her John's soul. Just seeing what time we have. This is a story I heard from a Toronto teller named Merrill Arbing. It's called The Man Who Fell Out of Love with His Wife. So there was a couple who were very much in love, and they would go out for dinner, they would go dancing, he would bring her presents. They loved each other dearly, and he loved her so much that he thought to himself, I want to make sure that she is always looked after. And so he turned his attention even more to his business, and he worked very hard. He spent more and more hours working. He became more and more invested, shall we say, in the success of his business. It became to be really important for him to make money. And he began to resent how much money he had to pay to maintain her. Now, he skimped. They weren't going out for dinner. There was no dancing. There were no presents. She was wearing her old, worn clothes and did what she could to manage the budget. But he did not want to have to pay that anymore. So he checked into getting a divorce, but he found that he would have to pay alimony. Well, that was even worse. He'd be paying and he wouldn't even get any of these services. So he decided that what he needed her dead. So Now, you or I might not do this, but he went to the rabbi for advice on how that could be managed. Well, the old rabbi who had married them, he was horror-struck by this. No, I can't tell you anything. I don't know anything like that. I don't believe there is anything like that that's in our holy books. And the fellow insisted, no, I want her dead. I do not want to be paying alimony. I do not want to be married to her. And the only thing is if she's dead. Well, the rabbi, more to get him out of the office than anything else, he said, well, I hear there's a brand new young rabbi in the town. And you might check with him. He would be more up on all the things that might be available in the written works. And so the fellow got into his carriage and he drove into town and he had an appointment with the rabbi. And he explained the situation to the rabbi, just as I've explained it to you. And the rabbi said, well, let's see. And he hauled a big, thick, heavy book off the shelf, whoomp, onto the table. And he opened it up and he flipped through and he said, well, there is something here. It says here that somebody who makes pledges to charity and doesn't keep them, then their loved one will die. Ha! He says, that's right up my alley. No problem. Thank you, Rabbi. And he headed home. Well, the next service, he stood up and he pledged 10,000 rubles to the repair of the roof fund, because every church or synagogue needs their roofs fixed. And then, well, everybody was astounded, especially his wife. Anyway, they're listening gobsmacked at this. Not enough, he says, and I promised 10,000 rubles to the Widows and Orphan Fund. Whoa. But he wasn't finished. I pledged 10,000 rubles to the Window Repair Fund. Well, I can tell you that after that day, it was the talk of the town. Anyway, eventually, there was a knock at his door, and there they were, the three representatives of the Widows and Orphans, the roof, and the window funds. They told him they were there to collect his pledge, 10,000 rubles each. And he said, no way, you fools. And he slammed the door, bam. Then he waited, and he watched his wife. She went about her daily routine. No changes. Nothing seemed to happen. This went on for some time. You can imagine that nobody at the synagogue really spoke to him after that, but he didn't care. And so eventually he took another trip in to see the rabbi in town. And he told the rabbi, listen, I did exactly what it said. I made my pledges, and I have defaulted on those pledges publicly. She's still fine. She is not even sick, never mind dead. Well, he went back to the book, the rabbi, looked and he says, well, do you take her out for dinner ever? No. Buy her any gifts? Nope. Nope. You do anything together? Nope. Well, the problem here is that how would any spirit who was to fulfill your wish, how would they know that she was a loved one? There's no any way to know that. So you had better treat her that way so it can be clear. She is a loved one who's supposed to die because of your defaulting on your pledges. Aha. That made sense to him. So soon he went out and he bought her a new dress. And he took it home and he had a present for her as well. Well, she was flabbergasted at this. Suddenly, a present, a dress, and then he took her out for dinner. It was a bit awkward the first couple of times, but gradually they got talking, and then they started dancing, and you know, the love that they had, it started to come back. It started to come back. He began to love her as he had before. Well, of course, she was ready to love him again, too. I mean, no accounting for that taste, right? But there it was. And so she fell ill. And now, Now he was panicked. He did not want her to die. And so he went back to the rabbi and he said, she's sick now. He said, well, isn't that what you wanted? No, I love her. I do not want her to die. How can we change this? How can I take it back? And he went and he looked at the big book again, flipped a page or two, and he said, well, maybe if you honor those pledges you made, maybe that would make the difference. Yes, Rabbi, that makes sense. And so he went back, and to the astonishment of everyone, he gave the 10,000 rubles to the widows and orphans, to another 10,000 for the roof, another 10,000 for the windows. But she was still not well. And he waited and he prayed. And gradually, she got better. She got better. And so he went down to check in with the rabbi in the town. And he said to the rabbi, it worked, Rabbi. She's better. Thank you for your help. And off he went. And the rabbi sat back in his chair and he thought, a marriage saved, $10,000 to the widows and orphans, $10,000 to the roof, and $10,000 to the windows. A good day's work done. As you see, I'm ranging far and wide for both love and lunacy in the same package. And now we have Pat Forrest, I'll let her announce her story for you. Come on down. Oh, I should say to you that I usually give a bit of an introduction, but for Pat, I'd just like to say my observation. I've seen different storytellers over the years, but it's been about 5 years you've been storytelling now?
7 now.
Maybe a little more?
6 or 7.
6 or 7. Well, I can tell you, I don't think I have ever seen a storyteller more determined to investigate every single way possible to tell a good story.
Thank you, Lee. That's very kind. My story is called The Ox, the Donkey, and the Farmer. And it's from a collection of 1001 Arabian Nights. Now, there's lots of those collections out there, but this one is by Geraldine McCacken. A farmer had 2 animals. He had an ox for plowing his field and a donkey for riding into town. Now the farmer's legs grew long and strong, and the donkey's legs seemed to grow shorter, or maybe it was just that his belly grew bigger. In any event, the farmer rarely saddled up the donkey for those infrequent rides into town and just walked there instead. Now, when the ox would come in from the field after a long day, his knees buckling after all that work, he would see the donkey laying in the shade of the stable, sleek, fat, and smiling. Now, it turned out the donkey's only work was to smile, and he did it very well. Oh, the ox would say, "Oh, Brother Donkey, you have such a wonderful life. Ah, my neck is sore from the yoke, my back from pulling, and my legs are like twice their size from all the mud. But you, you only have to lay there and think and smile." Now, the farmer happened to be outside the barn, and the farmer also happened to be able to understand the chat that was going back and forth. So he was sorry that his poor beloved ox was so downhearted. So he waited to see what the donkey would say in reply. "Oh, Allah gave you a large head, but a small brain. Oh, listen to what I'm going to tell you, if those small ears of yours are big enough to hear. Tomorrow, when you are plowing in the fields, fall down and don't get up, no matter if the farmer whips you." Oh, Brother Donkey, no, the farmer has never, ever used a whip." "Well, all the better. I mean, you can pant and wheeze and try to get up, but just fall down again." "Oh, thank you, wise brother. I know that you've always said that the wisdom of an animal is based on the size of his ears. So I don't understand what good this will do me, but I am going to take your advice." So the next day, the ox is out plowing the fields, and he falls down and refuses to get up. Now, the farmer does not get a whip, but instead takes pity on his poor ox and unhitches the plow from him and helps him get to his feet and leads him gently back to his stable, where he says, "Oh, my poor ox is not well. If he is not better tomorrow, he will not be able to plow the fields." When the farmer had gone, the donkey turns to the ox and says, "See, did I not give you good advice? And here's a little bit more. Do not eat any of your food tonight." So the ox did as he was told, and when the farmer came in, he saw that the ox's food had not been eaten, so he gently rubbed his ox's head and said, "Oh, my poor animal, you are still ill. You cannot go to the fields today." Now the donkey winks at the ox and smiles until he heard the farmer say, "So I will have to use the donkey instead to plow my fields." The donkey quit smiling as the farmer hitched him up to the plow and led him out. Now that donkey had to pull all day, and his feet became full of mud and his back ached all day. Then at night, back in the stable, the ox was full of gratitude for the donkey's advice. "Oh, Brother Donkey, all I had to do all day was flick my tail to keep the flies off and just watch the sunlight stream through the eaves." But the donkey had no words to say. He was already asleep and hadn't even eaten his hay. So the ox decided that he would eat from the donkey's hay this time and leave his untouched again. When the farmer came in, he saw the ox's hay still untouched, hitched up the donkey again, and off they went to the field. Now that poor miserable animal had to pull till his neck was like, it was all the hair was gone, like a vulture's head, like that bald, and his muscles were knotted like rope. Back to the barn that night, farmer's gone. The ox is still saying, "Oh, it is true. You are the wisest animal. You have the biggest ears. You've been telling me this." But the donkey, he was asleep again already. The next day in the field, the donkey decided that he would take his own advice. He lay down in the field and refused to get up. Now this time, the farmer fetched his whip and whipped the donkey while saying, "If this animal will not plow my fields, I can grow no crops, make no money, and I'll have to sell that miserable beast for dog meat." Well, the donkey quickly got up and continued plowing, but the farmer used his whip after that quite freely. Now this time, when the donkey went back to the stable, he saved some energy because he had a few things to say to the ox. Oh, Allah gave you a large chest, but small breath to speak the truth. You told me that the farmer never uses a whip. Well, no, it's true, brother. I've never seen a whip in his hand. But that's all that the donkey could manage. He was now asleep on all four legs, his poor ears plastered down about his head. So on the fourth day, the donkey got a plan to save him more work at the plow. "Oh, brother ox," he said, nuzzling up to the ox. "Oh, I feel so terrible. I've heard some really bad news, and it's going to affect your future. I feel responsible for having done this." What news? What did you hear?" said the ox. "I overheard the farmer saying that if that ox is not better soon, that he is going to have to sell him for dog meat." "Oh, no, the poor ox, he clambered about the stall like the clapper in a bell, and he mournfully said, 'Oh, please, please, brother donkey, help me. You've always told me that the wisdom is measured by the size of an animal's ears. Oh, please tell me what to do.'" "Okay, I'll tell you. First of all, eat up all of your hate, all of your food tonight. And in the morning, greet the farmer like the young and healthy ox that you are." So in the morning, the farmer came in, and the ox was frisking about his stall like only an ox can frisk. The farmer patted him on the head and then opened the door to the stable so that both of the animals could see what was in the farmyard. "I want you to see what I bought at the cattle market," said the farmer. Now out, laying on the ground, was the plow. The plow was attached to a shaft, and attached to the shaft on the other end was a brand new yoke with a harness on either side. Yes, he hooked up the donkey to one side and the ox to the other and led them both out to the fields to help each other plow the fields. While he went, he said in quite a loud voice so that any donkey who might be listening could hear him, "Now, who was it that first said that old saying? Though man may have the smallest ears, they're large enough to overhear." Thank you. Thank you.
All this talk of donkeys reminds me of my sister and her donkey, who was very jealous. So when she would take the horse out, you could hear that donkey braying, "I swear," for 2 kilometers because he was unhappy and wanted to go too. He didn't want to be ridden. He just wanted to go too. So that's the end of our first half, but I have some announcements. With the help of Dahlia Levy from the Cowichan Library here in Duncan, storytellers and story listeners are continuing to meet at the library to listen and tell stories and perhaps learn a bit more about both. There's no fee and registration is not required, so you can drop in anytime that they're going. The next meeting is June 10th from 5:30 to 7:30. As I say, no registration is required and there's no charge. The Victoria Storytellers Guild night is June 9th at 7:30, in person or online. Just put in a search for the Guild and the details are on our website. And tickets are $5. The evening is our last Fern Street until September. For members, we will have at least 2 stories in the garden, that is, members' gardens during the summer. Membership is only $25 for the year, entitles you to attend our monthly storytellings as well as other events, and gives access to our library. Also, free treats at Stories at Fern if you come down in person. So that's my sales pitch. The next Stories from the Duncan Showroom will be July 20th at 2 p.m. as part of Longevity John's 39 Days of July. Yay! Down by the tracks, I think. And that's actually all I have for you. I guess we're coming into the summer season. So we take about 10 minutes and we'll be back with more stories from both of us. Thank you.
This old house has seen its fair share of sorrow. Joy for today, hope for tomorrow. In this old house, there are nights I don't recall. Watch letters burn and seasons turn and her lover call. In this old house, in this old house. These old jeans, they hold whispers of romance. Once a baby blue, now faded in my hands. In these old jeans, I find the color of her eyes. Been worn so thin again and again, my love, it never dies. These old jeans, these old jeans. This old guitar holds my blood on string. Fishes right in my hands as I sing. With this old guitar, I find words I could never find on my own. Forgotten dreams and busted seams, memories of home. In this old guitar, this old guitar. This old house has seen its fair share of sorrow. Joy for today, hope for tomorrow. This old house, this old house, this old house. This old house.
want an education, a piece of paper. My name is on a door, but sooner or later they'll find out who I really am and see right through this empty man. I'm an imposter, real fake, a plastic helicopter, big, big mistake. I'm an imposter, big, big mistake. People call me sir, I've got a parking space. I'm hollow on the inside, an empty briefcase. I wear a three-piece suit, they wanna vote for me. My face is on a billboard, maybe now they'll see. I'm an imposter, real fake, a plastic helicopter, big, big mistake. I'm an imposter, big, big mistake. I'm an imposter. I won the election by a landslide. Now they're counting on me, but I just wanna hide. I'm hosting parties where people laugh at my jokes. It's hilarious. What's wrong with these folks? I'm an imposter, real fake, a plastic helicopter, big, big mistake. I'm an imposter, big, big mistake. I'm an imposter. I'm an imposter, big, big mistake. A plastic helicopter.
Well, welcome back. We have another half for you, and I'll be going first. And my story is Tormod Krupak. It's from George Macpherson, a well-known Scots teller from the Isle of Skye, where this story is set. No, there was no doubt about it. That was not his cow. Might be the same color of his cow, might have the same markings as his cow, might be the same breed as his cow. Neighbors might look at it and say that it was his cow, but it was not his cow. For his cow, his beloved Ailey, when he spoke to her, she wiggled her ear in soft response. This cow, nothing. And worst of all, when he milked this cow, well, what came out was vile, blue, foul-smelling stuff not good for man or beast. But when he milked Ailid, the pail was full of foaming, fine, frothy milk. No, this was not his Ailey. And so, let me think what comes next exactly. And so this was a terrible blow for Tormod. He was called Tormod Krupak, which means crippled Norman. And in his day, He had been a strong man, but some disease had come over him, and his knees and his hips were swollen and twisted and very painful. It was difficult for him to walk, and sometimes he couldn't walk at all. And that meant that he had to ask his neighbors to come and help, come and bring in the harvest, to do planting, to do other work. But worst of all for him, the worst, was he had to ask them to actually milk Ailey, because he couldn't do it himself. And now there was this cow, this changeling in his barn, and he didn't know what to do. He sat and he thought about it for a while. So he decided that he would make his way very painfully down the glen to see the wise woman. And when he got there, he told her the whole story of what had happened. And she said, well then, Tormund, did you curse your cow? Curse my cow? I would never do that. I love my cow. She's my companion. She's my friend. I can talk to her. No, I would never curse my cow. Think, Tormund. Think carefully. Did you perhaps curse your cow not meaning to? Well, last night, after I'd milked her, she was so good. She was so kind. She gave such milk. I wanted to give her a bit extra hay. And so I went up beside her to put it by her head. And then she shifted and she knocked me into the side of the barn. And oh, it hurt so much. I said, damn it, Ailey, can't you stay still? Well, there you are, Tormund. You cursed your cow and made a gift of her to the fairies. But I can't have that. I have to have her back. She's my friend. She's my companion. I love that cow. I have to have her back. What can I do to get her back? Well, Tormund, there is a way that may work, but there may be some danger to you. I don't care about the danger. I have to have Ailey back. What do I have to do? Well, you will have to give the little people good gifts. Now, you go home and you go through everything you have and you find the best things you have to wear. You put them on, and then you get a horseshoe nail and a mallet, and you go down to the barn and you go to that cow and you put that nail right over the dumb spot. You know where that is, where the hips join near where the hips join the spine. And then you drive it in with one blow of the mallet. Yes, of course, thank you. And so he made his painful way back up the glen, and he went into the house, and he looked at what he had. Well, there was a pair of deerskin boots. They'd hardly ever been worn. They were good boots. So he put them on. And then he looked around and he found a great kilt, a plaid, to make into a Fillmore. And so and it had hardly ever been worn. It was in very good shape. And so he pleated it and folded it, and he put it on and he strapped it on with a beautiful belt made of bull leather. It too had hardly been worn. Well, then he looked further, and there was a beautiful linen shirt, dyed saffron, that his mom had woven, and the sky made in sky linen is the finest in the world, and it was the last thing that she had given to him. So he put it on, and there he was, Tormund dressed as his best. So then he got the nail and he went down to the barn, and just as he was getting in the barn and looking at that cow, he started to feel a little bit of fear back of his neck. But then he remembered Ailey, which by the way means light, Ailey, and so he went and he placed that nail, and then he hit a mighty blow, bam, and all of a sudden, whoosh, he's flying up through the air, and then he's flying across the countryside. He can look down. He can see the moors, and he can see the ocean and the islands. And he goes along, and then all of a sudden there's a tunnel, and he's flying down the tunnel. And whoom! He lands, and he picks himself up, and he's in a great cavern. And there are hundreds of the little people there. And an old man comes over to him and says, "Well, Tormod, what are you doing here?" "I've come to get my cow. I need to get my cow back." "Tormod, you cursed your cow and made a gift of her to us. She's ours now." "But I can't have that. I'm a poor man. She's my friend. I talk to her. I love that cow. She's my companion. I have to get her back. What can I do? What can I do to get her back?" The old man said, "Well, Tormod, you will have to give us good gifts, and you'll have to prove to us how much you love your cow." "I don't have much, but anything I have, I'm happy to give." And so the old man gestured and brought the other old men over and said, "What gift would you have of this man?" They looked him up and down, and they said, "Well, he has a good pair of deerskin boots. If we had those boots, all of us could have boots at least that good or maybe better." Tormod stepped out of the boots and handed them over. Take them, with my thanks." And so the old man took the boots. And then the old man gestured and brought the younger men in. "Well, what gift would you have of this man?" And they looked him up and down. They said, "He has a really good bullskin belt. If we had a belt like that, we could each have a belt like that or better." Tormod took it off. "Take it, and my thanks." And so the young man took the belt. So then he called up the old women and said, "What gift would you have of this man?" And they looked him over and they said, "That is a very good plaid. If we had that plaid with us, we could each have a plaid like that or better and be as well dressed as he is." "Well, take it with my thanks." And he handed it over to the young, the old women. And then the old man called up the young women. "What gift would you have of this man?" Well, they looked him over, and all he had was his shirt. But it was a beautiful shirt. And they said, "That is woven, the sky weaving the best in the world, and it's beautifully dyed with the saffron. If we had that shirt, each of us could have a shirt that good or better and be as well dressed as him." Here Tormod hesitated, because it was the last thing he had, but more, it was the last thing his mother had given. "Well there, Tormod," said the old man, "so maybe you don't love your cow as well as you say." "Oh, no," he said, no, and he took it off and he handed it to them. And there he stood, naked. And the old man said, "You've done well, Tormod. You have given us good gifts, and you have proved how much you love your cow. So you will have your cow back. But you have given us good gifts, so we need to give you a good gift." And he called all the women up, young and old, and they picked up hazel branches and other herbs and such, and they started to beat him. They beat him around his buttocks, his hips, his knees, his legs, his calves, till he couldn't bear the pain, and he screamed. And at that moment, whoosh, he was whisked up into the air, and he was flying over the Isle of Skye again, over the mountains and the islands and the moors, and then he was let down quite gently on one of those moors. And nearby was a cow, and he called her, and her little ear wiggled. So he knew it was his Ailey. So he walked over and he took her by one horn and he started walking back home. And people saw him there and they started to laugh and point. And so they decided that he was not going to be crippled Norman. He was going to be nude Norman. Back, no. And so he didn't mind. He didn't mind a bit, because when he looked down, he saw that his legs were straight and strong again. And so he walked back and put Ailey back in the barn. And now he could do all the things he needed to do around his farm, and he could help his neighbors as they had helped him. title is of Pat's story is Fair Exchange. There seem to be a few exchanges going on this stage here tonight.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, there's going to be another changeling story, but not a cow. So this story, this version of Fair Exchange is taken from Maid of the North, Feminist Folktales from Around the World by Ethel Johnston Phelps. There was a young woman, and she was all alone in the world, except for her young child. She had a cow, a few chickens, and a small garden to get by on. And to earn a bit of extra money, she would work in the fields during haying time and harvest time. One day, she went out to work and she placed her son on a small blanket under the shade of a giant hawthorn tree. And she picked up her scythe and she went off to mow the hay. After a few lengths back and forth, she heard the baby crying hunger, and so she rushed off to see how he was. But even as she was coming close, she thought, that doesn't sound like my good-natured little boy. And when she got there, it's true. Her dark-haired, chubby-cheeked little boy was gone, and in its place was a thin, sickly, pale child with little tufts of fair hair. Oh, she was distraught. She went immediately up and down, asking all the mowers if they had seen her little boy and seen anybody near the hawthorn tree. But no one had seen anything. And that poor little sickly child was still crying, so she went back because she was a kind-hearted lass, and she took pity on the little baby and nursed him. And then she laid him back down because she had to go back out to the fields because she needed the money. As the day finished, it'd been weighing on her. She wanted to find her son, but she also knew that she couldn't leave that other poor child in the fields all night. So she went back and wrapped him up in her baby's blanket and took him home with her. That evening, and all the next day, she went up and down the lanes of the town asking everyone she saw, not just knew, but anyone that she saw, if they had seen her dark-haired, chubby little boy. But no one had seen him. The fairy folk have taken your child and left a sickly one in its place, a changeling. In order to get your son back, you will have to get rid of the changeling. But the ways they told her, that the things that they told her she had to do, she could not even bear thinking about. She was determined to get her son back, but she didn't know how to do it. So she just continued on. She kept the baby, the sickly one, at home and fed it and nursed it and took care of it, all the while thinking about how to get her own son back. And the baby got better. He got healthy, and his hair grew into golden red locks, and she said, "Oh, if only your mother could see you now, she would hardly recognize what a handsome, healthy little boy you are." One day, she heard about a woman, an old woman, who had knowledge of the ways of the fairy folk. Now, she lived way out on the moors, so the young lass, she bundled up the child and headed off. It was a long, long walk to the woman's cottage. And when she got there, she told the woman the story of her son and said, "So, do you know where the fairy folk live?" She said, I need to see them. I need to get my son back." And the old woman said, "Yes, I do, but do you not understand the danger in it?" "Oh, it doesn't matter." "No, lass, they will blind you or maim you or even keep you in their hill forever." "Well, at least then I would be with my son." "Oh, you just don't understand." She said, "No, I need to see the queen. She will know who took my baby." "Okay, lass, I see you're not gonna listen to my warning, so I will tell you what I know." "Well, thank you. I mean, that is why I'm here." The fairy folk live in that big hill out on the moor. They seldom come out, and when they do, there are few that can see them. "Have you seen them?" "Yes," said the old woman. "I did a favor for them once, and they have been good neighbors to me." "Well, when do they come out? Tell me, because I will just go and ask for a fair exchange. I will give them their fairy baby back, and I want mine in return." "Lass, you cannot go to the queen. She will fly into a rage if you demand your child back." "I have to try." All right, they come out on Halloween. All of them, they go out for a ride abroad. So, well, that's good, she said. I will wait and then go see them then. So the old woman said, "Well, that's not a thing I would do, but do as you see fit." So before the lass took the child back to her house, to her cottage, she went out to the fairy hill, and kind of thought maybe she could find a way in already. She kicked at a few stones and pulled a few bushes, but there was no way in. So she headed back home and waited for Halloween. It was a long way still, and finally the nuts ripened and fell to the ground, and the leaves turned green. No, they turned from green to gold and red and drifted downward. On Halloween, she fed the cow. No, she milked the cow and fed the baby. Phew. And then she bundled up that little child, who was now just, he was happy. I mean, he was a little happier, although he still had a kind of a far away look in his eyes. But she bundled him up and headed off. It was a dark night. The clouds scudded across the moon. And she had to stop every so often because the little boy was heavy now. But she would stop, rest, and then keep going. I mean, twice she turned the wrong way, but she finally made it to the fairy hill, where she sank gratefully to the ground. She didn't know if she was there too early or too late, or where exactly they were going to come out. And it had been a long walk, and her eyes closed. She dozed. She was woken near midnight with the sound of silvery, jingly bells, and she looked up, and there was a eerie fairy light shining off of the hill, and she could see the queen led the group out. And the queen, oh, she was resplendent in that clothes of green and gold, and her red, coppery hair flowed behind her. But she was too far away, and she couldn't get there before, in a flash of wind, they were gone. The eerie fairy light was out, and she was left alone on that dark moor. Oh, okay. I never thought it would be easy. So she went out closer to the hill, closer to where they had come out, and fixed in her mind where exactly the opening was by knowing where that tree was and that rock, and if she sat here next time, she would be very close. So that's what she did before she bundled up the little boy again. made her way back to her cottage just before daybreak. She arrived, and, well, she had a whole day's work ahead of her. The winter passed with its cold and icy sleet. And then one day, she saw the old woman back at the market in the spring. "Ah, I see you still have the changeling. Yes, I succumbed to the sleep on Halloween, but I am determined to go back again. Do they come out on May Eve?" "They should," said the old woman, "but this time come to my cottage in the afternoon, rest a bit, and then you can go out that evening." "Oh, thank you. That is very, very kind. I will do that." So on May Eve, she bundled up that child, and now he's several pounds heavier than he was before, but he was still too little to walk that whole way. So she carried him along, got to the cottage, rested, had a bite to eat, and at sunset, she made her way out to that point on the fairy hill now that she had identified, and she sat there, put the child to sleep, and waited. And then she heard the silvery bells again, and she looked up, and there was that eerie fairy light, and the queen on her white steed was just coming directly to her because she was right in her path. And she reached up and she grabbed the bridle of the queen's steed. "Who dares to halt the queen?" And she raised her staff as if to harm or blind the young lass, but she said, "Excuse me, ma'am, if you please. I've brought you a gift." "A gift? What manner of talk is this?" And at that point, the little boy woke up, cried out, and stood up. What is that child? Why are you bringing him here?" And she went and got him and held him close to her side and said, "He is a handsome child, isn't he? Is this the gift?" "Well, in a manner of speaking," said the lass, "he was left in a field last summer, a pale, frail thing. Do you remember?" The queen said nothing. "I took him home. I nursed him, shared the little food that I had, and I was happy to do a favor for one of your women. Do you know his mother?" "I am his mother." "Oh," said the lass, thinking a little, "I thought he might be of royal blood. He is that handsome and clever a lad. Give him to me. I want to see if he is truly mine." "No. I did a favor, and I need a favor in return. I want my child back." "I could seize the child." "I know you could, but I have heard that fairies honor favors honestly, that they return the favor. I took care of this child. He's now a healthy, chubby. Well, why don't you keep him? Why are you bringing him back?" "Well, because he's of fairy stock, and I don't think he will last long on the outside, and that would be a pity." "Well, you know, I could seize both of you and just put you in the hill, put you in the hill forever." "I know you can, but I think that you would want to return the favor. And besides, he would make a wonderful addition to your court. He is so healthy and clever." "Ah, You're a brave one," said the queen. "Bring the dark-haired child to me. Now give me mine." "No," the lass said, "not until I have my own at my side." "Oh, you don't take no for an answer, do you?" "I need my child back." And then her child was at her side. That dark-haired, rosy-cheeked little boy, bigger than she remembered, but just as she remembered. And she handed up the fair-haired child to the queen. And the queen sat him on the front of her saddle and looked him over and said, "Oh, he is healthy and handsome. You took good care of him." And looking down at the young lass, the young woman, as she was holding her own child strongly in her arms, she said, "Go in peace. The kindness and good fortune of the fairy folk will be with your child for the rest of his life." And then in a rush of wind, the fairy queen and all of her troop were gone, and the jingly bells disappeared, and the eerie fairy light was gone. The young woman, still holding her son tight, walked back to the old woman's cottage, stayed there for the night rather than trying to make her way back home. And as the queen had promised, prosperity and good fortune came to the young mother and her child and stayed with them forevermore.
Thank you, Pat. I have heard terrible things that have been done to the Fay babies to make them go away. So that's a kinder one. And was that your edition? Or is that how it was?
That's the story from.
Well, good for you for finding that story. So this one, as I call it, the Rose of Tralee. Let's see if I can find my place in it. Yes. She was lovely and fair as the rose of the summer. She was lovely and fair as the rose of the summer, but was not her beauty alone that won me? Oh no, 'twas the truth in her eyes ever dawning that made me love Mary, the Rose of Tralee. There is a Tralee, and there was a Rose of Tralee in County Kerry. This song was a huge hit in the 1800s, the latter 1800s. And I have two versions of this because I love those old songs, and I have two sing-along versions. And in each one, the music is by Charles Glover. The words, it says, are Mordaunt Spencer, which is a lie. And I want to tell you about how all of this came about. Now, there was a Rose of Tralee. Her name was Mary O'Connor. Her father was Dennis O'Connor, and he was one of the finest cobblers in Tralee. Cobblers made a good living in those days because most people walked everywhere. There weren't trains or bicycles or things like that. However, it was mostly serviceable type of footwear. Whereas Mary O'Connor, he was very proud of his daughter. She was stunningly beautiful. Men had trouble talking to her, young men, I think, as I read this. But she was a lovely person as well. And he liked to have her dressed well. And he made her shoes of the special soft leather that he would get from Spain to do that. And one day, she was walking along the road, and she'd been out gathering berries. And the widow Munchalot, I've got this right, Munchalot, stopped her carriage because she noticed those wonderful shoes that Mary was wearing. Now, those kinds of shoes, people in the big house, what they call them, the more wealthy people in the big houses, they would order those from, Dublin or even London. They would never get the local cobblers to make them. But here was this young woman, obviously not from a big house, walking along the street wearing one of those pairs of shoes. So she stopped her carriage and she said hello to the girl and asked her name. And the girl told her, and she said, "Where did you get those lovely shoes?" "Oh, my father made them for me." "Well, he wouldn't be best pleased to have you wearing them as you're collecting berries in the bush." And she said, "Oh, I took them off to do that." And she said, "Well, do you think your father would make a pair like that for me?" "Oh, I'm sure he would, ma'am." "Well, have your father come to," and she gave the address. Well, she didn't really need to. Mary knew who this was. "To their big house tomorrow at 3. And come with him, will you, dear?" "Yes, ma'am." And so they went up to the big house. Now, Mrs. Mulchinok, she was a widow. Her husband was one of the Mulchinoks, and they were a wealthy merchant family there. And she and her children were living in the big house, even though her husband had died. And his brother was supporting them. And one of his sons, William, was working in one of some capacity there, but his heart wasn't really in it. Her son, William, wanted to be a poet, and he was writing quite a lot of poetry. But since neither you nor I know how to pronounce that name, you know that he was not a famous poet in the end. Anyway, what happened is that Dennis O'Connor had to leave his daughter behind at the big house when he came away from there, because Mrs. Mulchinok had taken a fancy to her. And she was an intelligent, pleasant girl. And what she did to persuade the father, she said, "Now I will promise you that I will make sure that she is properly trained in service here. And you know that a letter of reference from us will give her entrance to any big house in Ireland. And then she will always have a secure career." He had to agree. She wouldn't end up being a cobbler after all. And so he left her behind. Now, she was a hard worker and a pleasant person, so she fit in quite well. And in fact, she got promoted to working with 2 of the children there. So in that capacity, she ran across William. Well, now we have a romantic young man, a poet, runs across a beautiful, lovely girl. And eventually, one of the other servants told Mrs. Mulchinok that they were stepping out together, and brought her, in fact, a poem that had been under Mary's pillow. Mrs. Mulchinok looked at it and thought, "Oh no, oh no, we got a love affair going on here. And it's on my paper, probably written with my pen too." Anyway, so she thanked the young woman who had blown the whistle on this, and waited for her son to show up. And he came and greeted his mother, and his mother handed the poem to him. And he said, "Well, that's a nice little bit of drivel, isn't it?" And they had a little go around about who Mary might be. And finally, she told him, "I know that you are seeing Mary from the Mary O'Connor." And he said, yes, I love her, and I want to marry her." That was hard news, and what the mother had feared. And she said, "Well, you know that can't happen." "Yes, it can. I do love her. Yes, but you are from this level of society, and she, lovely as she is and capable as she is not. And those kind of marriages almost never work out. And what are you going to do for income? I think with your poetry, you are not going to make enough for milk for the cat. Never mind to support a household. You know that your uncle will not support you in this, and he will cut you off, and maybe me too, if you carry on with a marriage. And are you going to be there learning to be a cobbler with her father down in Brogue Lane? I don't think so." And he says, "But I do. I love her, and I want to marry her." "Yes." And if you persist in that, I will send her home tomorrow. But you can't do that. The gossip, they would think that she was being sent away for theft or something terrible like that. Yes, she said. I promised her father that I would look after her while she's here and protect her. This is not protecting her. But if I send her home, then she at least will not be involved in an inappropriate marriage and what will be a resulting disaster for your family and for hers. And he didn't want to give up on that. He thought so she extracted a promise from him that he would give her up and that he would not see her again, and she therefore would not send Mary home in disgrace. And he said, I have to think about this. I need a couple of weeks to go through what's happened. And so she said, well, you know, I have a friend from school, and she lives over in Balsanor, and she has been saying to me that you should go and visit them. Why don't you do that? How about tomorrow morning you should head out? And so that was what happened. Now, what his mother knew, which William did not, was that there was a young woman who was her school friend's daughter, who was reputed to be very clever and beautiful and very suitable in terms of marriage. So he went there, and it wasn't very long before his poems started to have Alice in them and not Mary. And eventually he proposed, and that proposal was accepted, and he was accepted. And he married that girl, and he went off to America with her. Lived there a number of years and had a couple of kids over there. He tried writing poetry, and some of it was published. He had, in fact, a book of poetry, which was well reviewed, but nobody bought it. Anyway, at some point, he thought he had to go back. He had to go back. He missed Kerry. He missed Tralee. He missed Ireland. And so he said to his wife, we have to go back. We have to go. And she said, there is no way I am going back with my children to that land that's full of misery and disease and poverty. No, you can go, but we are not coming. He said, well, I will be back. I just have to see those green hills again. And so he went back to, just as he arrived, he was waiting for the carriage to take him up to the big house where his mother was, and a funeral procession went by. And so he asked, and it was Dennis O'Connor's funeral procession. And the fellow knew the family, of course, a small town. And he said, yes, Mary had died 6 months previously. She'd never been married or had children. And he then launched into the rumors that she had been in love with the young man and blah, blah, blah. And it was his story, was the gossip of the town. So he then left immediately. He had his luggage taken up to the big house where he was now going to live, and he went to the graveyard. And there he found the new grave of Dennis, and beside it Mary's grave. And he sat by Mary's grave, and he wrote a poem by her grave about her. Now, it was published somewhere, but then what happened is that Mr. Spencer published it in his book as if it was his own. Now, William never went back to America. He suffered ill health after that, and he died in Tralee at age 44. Meanwhile, Mr. Glover had set this poem to music. It was a huge hit. A hit all through Britain, all through the British-speaking world, and beyond. And so it became very famous, and so did Tralee. And there was a Rose of Tralee, and of course that was Mary O'Connor. And she had even been called that in her lifetime. She was such a beautiful young woman. And Tralee was a very small place. Anyway, time goes on. And in the late 50s, early 60s, the business folks in Tralee are working out a way to bring more tourists in. So they decide they're going to have a festival of the Rose of Tralee. So they start this festival, which involves a beauty contest, and it's open to anybody in the Irish diaspora. people from all over the world came and participated. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And of course, what was sung? The Rose of Tralee, clearly. And then what happened is, in 2019, the 60th anniversary of this festival, they decided, the organizing committee, to investigate the rumor that Mr. Spencer was not actually the author of this poem. And what they did is they hired a forensic linguist. Forensic linguist? Who'd ever heard of that before? Anyway, the linguist concluded that indeed it was William who had written this verse. And it was his verse that had been sung all these years and continues to be. And it still isn't in books like mine, but I've written it in. So I wanted to sing it to you because you probably know it. And if you do know it, you can sing along with me. The pale moon was rising above the green mountains. The sun was declining beneath the blue sea. When I strayed with my love to the pure crystal fountain that stands in the beautiful vale of Tralee, she was lovely and fair as the rose of the summer, yet 'twas not her beauty alone that won me. Oh no, 'twas the truth in her eyes ever dawning that made me love Mary, the Rose of Tralee. I just figure, well, there's hardly anybody here. I can tell a story that I really like. And sing. Yeah. As I get older, it doesn't work quite as well, if it ever did. So on my list here, I have a story called The Two Donkeys. And it comes from Diane Wolkstein and the Magic Orange Tree. And these are tales from Haiti. It's really little. There were once two donkeys who really loved each other, and they ate the grass on this mountainside, and they played. They loved to rub their heads against each other's necks, and they would throw themselves on the grass and roll around and pretend to nip at each other's ears. They had a lovely time. But then one year, the spring rains didn't come as they had come before. Things began to dry up. The leaves fell off the trees, the grass was gone, and so the two of them talked about what they could do to survive. And they decided that what they would do is they would turn themselves into human beings, and they would go off and get jobs. My audience is laughing at this. Well, it was a good plan, and the plan was that when the rains came back and the grass began to grow again, then they would meet again at that same mountain. And so off they went. Now, as it happened, the female donkey, when she changed into being a human being, was absolutely gorgeous. She was stunningly beautiful. In her first day, she ran into this farmer who was so infatuated, he married her that day on the spot. And so she worked in his house. You know, she made the dinners and cleaned and all of that sort of stuff. And the other donkey went and found a job someplace. And then the rain started to come back, and the grass began to grow. And so the male donkey went back to the mountain, and he waited, and he waited. But his partner didn't show up. So he went looking for her, and he would go through town after town, this donkey braying, "Anne, Anne, the grass is on the mountain, Nan." And off he, nothing. Finally, he came to the town where she did live. And she was in the kitchen cutting up vegetables and such to make her husband's lunch. He's out in the field. And she had to get it done because he was not kind to her. Anyway, as soon as she heard her partner's braying, calling her name, she began to transform. Her hands that stretched out to be hooves, her tail stuck out in her skirt, and she dropped her clothes and she smashed things. She ran out of the house, and her husband was getting really angry. He's thinking, where is she with my lunch? It's time for her lunch. I guess she needs another beating. And so he went off, and he got home just as these two donkeys were galloping down the street, and he heard a crash from the house, and he went in. Every single pot was smashed. And the donkeys ran off and made their way up to the hill, and they were happy there, eating their grass. But I tell you this story to warn you that before you marry somebody in a hurry, you need to have a look at their brothers and their sisters and their cousins and their aunts and especially at their mothers. Otherwise, something like this could happen to you. It could. There ought to be something educational in any of these stories, right? So the last story I want to tell you is the very first story I ever told. And it's from Dan Yashinsky from a radio program that I heard back in '86, which got me interested in storytelling, and I had ordered the transcript. And so when it was my turn to tell a story for the first time, this is the one I chose, and I can't remember what he called it. Doesn't have a title. But it comes from the Baal Shem Tov, and he was the founder of, I have to write this out too. Pretty scattered today. He's the master of the good name, who was the founder of Hasidic Judaism. And he was in a small village. He'd been there some time, and as he was a teacher, students came to him, and they would study with him in this small village. And what happened was that there was a child in the village who fell ill and was very, very sick. And the Baal Shem Tov, he loved that child, and he really wanted that child to live. So what he did is he made a pure white wax candle. And he went by a secret way that he knew into the forest. And he went to a great, huge tree that he knew of. And he planted the candle at the base of the tree, and he lit it. And then he prayed a special prayer over and over and over again all night long for the recovery of this child. And then when dawn came, he took the candle, he made his way back, and he prayed that it had been enough. And it was. The child recovered. Well then, many, many years went by, and one of his students from that day became a revered rabbi himself and had his own group of students that he was teaching. And once again, a child fell ill. And he remembered what the Baal Shem Tov had done, and he wanted to help this child recover. Well, he didn't remember about the candle. He did manage to find his way on that path to that tree. He didn't know the special prayer, but he prayed, and he prayed all night long. And then as he got up to go back, he hoped that even without the things he couldn't replicate, that it would be enough. And it was enough. And many years after that, one of those students became as well a rabbi with his own students. And once again, there was a child who was ill. But this rabbi, he didn't know where the tree was. He didn't know anything about the candle. He didn't know the special prayer. So what he did is he sat in his study all night long, and he told the story of how these rabbis had helped to cure the little child. And he prayed it was enough. And it was. The child recovered. Then came a time of great turmoil and confusion, wars and displacement. And everything was lost. Or not everything, but many things were lost through that time. But there was once again a very sick child. And people, of course, they didn't know about the tree or the candle or the special way of getting there or the special prayer. All they knew was that a good man had saved a child by telling a story. And so they became storytellers. and all of them pray that it will be enough. I was sucking up to the storytellers in the room, you could tell. Anyway, now it's my pleasure on your behalf and mine to thank Longevity John and Ted Cadillac for this opportunity for Pat and I to tell our stories here. And I hope to see you again soon, perhaps on July 20th, out there on the tracks by Station Street, or at our next meeting at the library on June 10th. If you would like any information about storytelling or the storytelling organizations here on the island, you can always reach me by going through the Victoria Storytellers Guild website and sending an email through. They'll make sure that I get it. And I just want to thank you all and those who have joined us as well. A little bit haphazard because I was experimenting, you might say. And thank you so much, Pat, for coming and rescuing me. Otherwise, it would have been just me. What a terror that might have been. You would have gotten all the stories from my story chest. Anyway, thank you again, and we'll see you perhaps on the 20th.
Stories we have that we tell ourselves, stories that bend with time. Histories change like books on a shelf, pages that need a rewrite. These words we leave behind. All these thoughts are chased away by bottles of wine and stories